democracy, but also for development, and it's a net contributor to the global liberal order for the last 4 decades. One reason that this success has been Spain's ability to maintain national unity for over 500 years, despite ethnic and linguistic diversity. A push for Catalonian independence, however, calls that unity into question. A potential breakup of Spain by Catalonia is not in the US interest, in Europe's interest, not in Spain's interest, and ultimately not in Catalonia's interest. When observing this round, you should keep in mind what the resolution is really asking. The word should is used to indicate obligation, duty, or correctness, which means that we should be looking at this round in a moral lens. 3 main reasons you should vote con or reject the resolution are loss of major amounts of money in both Spain and Catalonia. Catalonia cannot independently handle the influx of migration, and Catalonia's independence movement may tear Spain's constitution apart. Contention 1, subpoint A. Contention 1, Catalonia's independence would hurt the Spanish economy. Subpoint A, Spanish economy would decline. In the event of Catalonian secession, there would be undoubtedly much to worry about in the economy for both Catalonia and Spain, as well as the members of the state and the European nation. The Spanish economy, Catalonia accounts for 20% of the Spanish economy and represents 25% of total exports from Spain, while the capital, Madrid, only makes up 11%. These figures stand as firm evidence that that Catalonia has in its hands would render Spain and itself useless. Subpoint B, Catalonia will miss out on the tourism revenue. Tourism seems to be taking a big hit so far. Experts say that spending in the sector in Catalonia in the first 2 weeks of October, that is, following the independence referendum, was down 15% from a year earlier. Tourism represents 11% of Spain's 1.1 trillion euro gross domestic product, with Catalonia at the capital and its capital Barcelona providing a fifth of that. The reservations of Barcelona are already down 20% compared to the last year. If the trend continues in the final 3 months of the year, it could be down. They could lose up to 1.2 billion euros. Contention 2, Catalonia cannot independently handle the influx of immigrants. Subpoint A, immigrants are concerned that the independence movement won't hear their voices. It's always best to be part of a larger country, just like having a bigger family to help you out. Immigrants illustrate the complexities of identifying in Catalonia, where they have helped make the economy both the largest among Spain's regions and the most diverse, alongside Madrid. With sizable populations of Muslims, Chinese, and others, Catalonia prepares for a regional election on November 5th that could be unbeneficial to the immigrant community. Subpoint B, immigrants complicate Catalonia's separatist picture. The influx of immigrants to Spain over the last decade have transformed parts of Catalonia too. In 2000, there were just 900,000 foreign residents. By 2011, there were close to 6 million, or 12% of the population. This has put pressure, those Catalonian face an immediate problem. The language. This has put pressure on the education system and the economy and the social lives of many people. In Vix, where 24% of the population are immigrants, the town council voted to prevent the illegal immigrants from voting. The Catalonia's failure to address the immigrants might lead to terrorism, might lead to tearing the country apart because of the lack to vote. Contention 3, Catalonia's independence movement may tear Spain's constitution apart. Despite the various attempts by the Spanish government to stop the symbol of Referendum on independence from being held in the wealthy region of Catalonia, the national government of Madrid has said it deploys the policies and will take orders by polling booths that are set up. The government says the country's constitution court have ruled that the vote is unconstitutional, though it has not stopped similar symbolic votes. Madrid has already ordered policy raids on the regional governments, and protests have taken place in Barcelona, where people aren't allowed to vote. Thank you.
Nicely done, Rosa. Okay. Jester? Oh, sorry, Sydney, you're reading.
Go ahead.
Contention 1, Catalonian independence will inspire greater independence movements. Secessionists in Brazil haven't been inspired to fight for independence due to the struggle in Catalonia. Subpoint 8, other countries across the world are watching the actions of Catalonia. People living in Rio Grande do Sul, Santa Catarina, and Paraná have begun movements towards independence. This Catalonian independence movement has the potential to inspire other Brazilian states to break away from their crisis-battered nation. This is a perfect time for places to grow more than they ever could, when connected to their original countries that restrict them, as the connection to another culture will affect how events affect them. Big events, when perceived towards a specific part of a nation, become a historical event which almost always influences the culture around them, which makes them what they are. Events that are individual to Spain and not to Catalonia do not allow Catalonia to develop on its own, which will be the cause of other independence-seeking places. Subpoint B. There are many separatist movements already happening across the world. 4 are happening in the Philippines, 8 in Myanmar, and several in Africa. These places' secession movements have varying reasons as to why they want to become independent, and the reasons range from language and cultural differences to the economy. Freedom and rights of individual people are more important than abusive economic growth. All abused people should be able to leave their unfair nation if there are negative effects against their own rights and growth as real human beings. Even things like culture and history have the right to be saved, and these are the things that make the world today. What you know of the world now is more than what you would know if more places were forced to stay dependent on their nations and stay quiet. Just look at the country we live in now from what it used to be while part of Europe. So many other places have the opportunity to become great with obvious risks. The seceding place is already quite aware of the risks they are taking, and if they wish to proceed, that means they have accepted them, which is not the original country's fault. The faults against the original country are forced as this country views the use of the seceding region, so it is justified. Contention 2. Ignoring Catalonia's Wilkins is a form of modern colonialism. Subpoint A. For around 40 years, the Catalan identity was suppressed by Spain. When Spain first became a republic, Catalonia was given greater political autonomy within the confines of the state. This autonomy was revoked after the Spanish Civil War, and Catalonia was heavily suppressed during the rule of Francisco Franco from 1939 to 1975. Catalan identity symbols were prohibited, and the Catalan language was restricted. Although not being oppressed physically or financially, Catalans have felt for years that their culture has been oppressed. Subpoint B. Catalan government is claiming that over 90% of those who took part in the referendum voted in favor of the independence. This referendum took place just a few months ago on October 1st and exemplifies the overwhelming support that the Catalonian people have on the topic of independence. Even though the independence is what the majority wants, Spain's government is choosing to remain in control. Subpoint C. Catalonian independence uphold democratic values. The way in which democracy ought to function is by listening to the will of the people, and so if we were to deny the will of the people in this instance, we would be going against the bedrock principle of democracy. This is a crisis of governance in which the people no longer trust their governments, and governments have turned their backs on the people. In history, empires have fallen due to unfair governments, but now there is a chance to change that. The United States has democratic values, and this could be a sign of the spread of democracy, a government in which the rights of these human beings have the opportunity to be more protected. Contention 3, Catalonian independence upholds Catalonian culture. By denying the Catalonia the capacity for independence, it is functionally denying them of the autonomy as a people with their own culture. Subpoint A, Catalonia has its own language. The Catalan language is very different from Spanish, and just how French is different from Italian. Italian is spoken in Catalonia, Valencia, Andorra, and just a few other places. It is the preferred language in Barcelona, while Spanish seems to be the more imposed language. The two languages sound very different, with grammar, pronunciation, and vocabulary. Subpoint B, Catalonia has its own traditions. Catalonia is known to be hardworking and focused on succeeding, whereas Spanish are usually seen as fun-loving and outgoing. While Catalonia does participate in Spanish holidays, it has a few of its own that are not recognized in other parts of the countries. Denying these holidays Spain is trying to cover up the fact that Catalonia is different from Spain and trying to oppress their rights. This is form of manipulation, which goes to show how wrong it is to deny these people the simple rights.
That's time. First two speakers. First two speakers, please stand for crossfire.
Yeah, it does.
3 minutes. Yeah.
May I ask the first question?
Sure.
Do you guys have any frameworks to start out with? Never mind. Have you thought about, in your first contention, you say that they would inspire greater independence movements, but you, like again, in contention or in subpoint A, you say that there are already a lot of independence movements on their way. So how would Catalonians inspire them if they're already making great steps on their own?
If Catalonia were to be allowed to succeed, it might inspire others to push more towards their governments, letting them be independent.
Okay, and then have you thought about how these movements could be positive or negative? It looks like you're just looking at it the positive side.
Well, yeah, because Catalonia is basically culturally its own country, so it doesn't make any sense why it should be still a part of Spain.
And then,
can I ask a question?
Sure.
All right, so in your second contention, you said you were talking about migration and immigrants, and you said that denying the immigrants to vote would lead to terrorism, which I think is a very big leap.
I didn't mean to say terrorism. I meant to just say like tearing the country apart. I just read terrorism on accident. I didn't mean to say terrorism.
Okay.
Okay, and then do you have any data to back up your contention 1 or 2?
Yes. For my first contention with the other ones I stated were 4 other movements are happening in the Philippines, 8 in Myanmar, and several in Africa.
Okay. Besides,
Myanmar.
what?
Myanmar.
Okay, and then in contention 3, you say that like the Catalonians' tradition it would help them uphold their tradition, but can't they uphold their tradition as part of Spain, just as people in America would uphold their own traditions?
Yes, but it wouldn't. They want it to be recognized as a national holidays instead of just instead of feeling that they're separate from their own countries.
Okay. Do you have any data for that?
Just the referendum that took place, that 90% of them voted for independence.
How many Spanish people voted for that, and how does that affect the Spanish people?
Spain wasn't part of the referendum.
How would it affect the Spanish people though if Catalonia were to be separated?
I don't think it would affect Spain very much in the culture aspect, which is part of my contention 3.
Do you have any other questions?
You said in your contention 1 that it would cause Spain to use 1.2 billion euros. Did you have a citation for that?
Yeah. Hold on, let me find it. Okay, that is from Press Associated for Spanish and Catalan Economies No Winter Standoff, and that is hold on, let me find where I said it. And I said it could lead to loss of up to 1.2 billion euros.
That's time. Liam, do you guys want downtime?
Yeah.
Okay.
A minute.
Okay.
Maybe.
Running up, going now.
Help. You're good.
Oh, the groove, man.
Oh shoot, no, what was I saying?
I know, I can't even.
30 seconds used.
Wait, my one first? No.
I know.
Oh yeah, he's on.
One minute used, one remaining.
Okay, so I'm going to go top to bottom on the throw cake. So here we go. Okay, so when looking at this resolution, we have to look at it with the light of humanitarian light because the pro side fails to give any framework. So that means like they have to accept our framework, so our framework rules over their framework. So looking at this through a humanitarian lens, our case clearly wins, and I'll be going contention 1, contention 2, contention 3 down their case. So with their first contention, they say like it would inspire independence movements, but they never say anything in their contention that would say that independence movements are good. They just say that it would inspire independence movements. They never say anything about how the independent movement would be good. So they just say like, oh, it would inspire movements, but we don't know if those movements are good or bad because they never give us any context, any data, or anything relevant to say that any movement is good. And they just randomly say independent movements are good. So their contention 1 clearly falls here. So moving on to their contention 2, they talk about modern colonialism. But like talking about modern colonialism, it's like saying like the U.S. like remaining with the South after the Civil War is like a form of colonialism, which is blatantly crazy. Like what they're saying is like language has nothing to do with it. Like people in America speak tons of different languages, and saying that everyone has to be the same in like a homogeneous like society, and saying that is blatantly like crazy, cruel, and it's just ignorant to the fact that people can have different cultures and subcultures, and they're failing to realize that subcultures can exist in culture. They're saying that we have to have every nation that's different has to be a different culture, and they're failing to realize the fact that like we can have subcultures in society, and we can immerse and we can adapt to other cultures, and like we can like compare cultures and have the same cultures in the same society. What they're through this, they're advocating for the fact that they only want nations to be one homogeneous, same culture, same language, same everything, which sounds which sounds like a dystopian kind of strange society to me. So then, moving on to their third contention, they say that it's in favor with like culture, and they're saying going back to their point about culture. It seems like a lot of what they're saying is about culture, and then going back to our framework, like us about being in a moral standpoint, like looking at it through like a moral standpoint with the word should. Like we're looking at it like we have to look at like cultures can live together, and that could be moral. And they're saying cultures can't live together, so therefore that's immoral, and they're failing to realize that like morality means that like multiple cultures can thrive together, and they're saying that it's immoral if multiple cultures are in like the same area. So they're saying that it's in favor with like the independence of culture, and they're saying like through this, like it doesn't matter how it affects Spain. They blatantly ignore the fact that it would affect Spain. They gave us that referendum, that survey that says like, oh, who wants to separate, and mostly everyone from Catalonia did, but they never took anyone from Spain. So they're blatantly ignoring the fact like how this would affect the people of Spain, and they're never looking at that. So they're being ignorant to the fact like these Spaniards, these people have lives as well, and they're not looking at that. Like looking at like our points and things, like we see that like it would tear Spain's constitution apart. So not only would it be negative towards Catalonia, but it would also tear Spain's constitution apart. It would hurt Spain, but like the pro side is failing to realize how it hurt Spain. So that's why their case falls, and their three contentions should all be dropped. Thank you.
Lauren, you want some downtime?
Yes.
Okay.
1 second.
How much do we have left?
You have a minute. You want to design this so that you spend about 2 minutes responding. There are things that put in your case back. You have 2 minutes attack.
Is it okay if I put this on? Thank you.
No, freeze.
$30 seconds used.
Oh.
45 seconds used. That's a minute. I'm going to stop you there, so you still have some time to prep for your other.
Do I have to go in order?
Nope, you can tell us. First, I'll stand up, and then tell us which order you want to go in. Do you want to address your case first, or do you want to address their case?
I'm going to address their case first.
Okay.
So, do you have evidence that Catalonia would suffer from being torn apart by other people coming into the country?
Don't ask them questions. Make arguments.
Because there is no evidence that immigrants would. There's no evidence that immigrants would tear them apart. Yeah. And economic growth is not more important than moral rights, which you made. I'm going to respond to that. Spain is acting as if Catalonia is just supposed to be like another part of Spain, and that's beneficial to them, which is wrong because the other people of Spain, they speak a different language and they're a different culture and they have different ways of life, and they're almost lying to themselves by treating these Catalonians like any other people. Denies the rights for the Catalonians to live in their own way, which is denying them their own human rights, as humans have the right to be aware of their own culture and have their own traditions. Also, the Spanish Constitution, if people change constitutions all the time, it happens in all countries, so that point is not valid in the long run. And you're saying that morality is part of this, and the people believe they're really protecting themselves, then why are they oppressing others? Because they're not really oppressing everyone as a whole, which is another valid point for why Catalonia should be allowed to secede. And with the referendum, Spain staying out of that was proof that they decided to act that Catalonia was just other space, like another spot that was beneficial to them. So that's why they decided to stay out of it. And the fact that 90% of people voted yes shows that even if you had everybody in there is still, you cannot deny that so many people still want this right in that they are being oppressed. And you talk about national unity is very important, but is it really effective? Because in terms of these being real human beings that are being heavily oppressed, how are these, like another place, maybe if it was heavily oppressed that we can think of, like America with slavery, like national unity wasn't really the point because it was just all about economic growth. So if we put it in terms of Catalonia and Spain, then why should it be any different just because like you wouldn't take somebody for your own benefit and put them in a big group and then say it's okay?
Right. Crossfire. Let's just get your stand, please.
So I have the first question.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So state the moral. Like, how is Spain denying Catalonian human rights? The people of Catalonia human rights.
So it's choosing to not let them have their own culture, as Catalonia wants to be independent.
How are they not having their own culture?
They feel that they're being that their culture has been oppressed for years.
How though?
Coming from the Spanish Civil War and they're heavily suppressed during the rule of Francisco Franco from 1939 to 1975. And their Catalan identity symbols were prohibited and the Catalan language was restricted.
But in 1975, this is now.
Yes, but they still have different languages in Spain.
So people can't live, people with different languages can't live in the same country, because that's what's happening right now in the US. People with different languages are living in the same country. You saying that's bad?
Yes, but the difference is that...
Okay, so let's have everyone speak English in America, okay? Is that what you're saying?
Liam.
That's exactly what I'm saying. But actually,
so we should all speak English in America.
Spanish is okay in America, and it's accepted. That is the same thing with Spain and Catalonia. All the language should be accepted, not one language, which is exactly why it's the same point. In America, English should not be the only language. There should be diversity, just like Catalonia and Spain.
Yeah, but like by separating them, and then you're like, oh, so by separating them and making them have their own language, then that's the only way they can have their own language?
No. It's just an example that Spain is culturally oppressing them.
Okay, so then why don't we instead of trying to separate Catalonia, because that has, on our side we see that has negatives on our side by them separating them, why don't we just try to push them have their language more integrated? Like, just separating just because of language just seems irrelevant.
It's an example because language it's evolved on what they have come to be.
Okay.
That is who they are and where they came from, and they have the right to keep that.
Okay. Do you have any questions? Yeah, you go ahead.
And did you still want to see our contention too?
After. Yep. Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay, so when was the last time the U.S. Constitution was changed? Because you say constitutions changed all the time.
Yeah, I mean of all countries.
Yeah, but like let's take the U.S. for example. When was the last time? Well, name the last time a constitution was changed that you know of.
Well, slavery is no longer.
Okay, that was a long time ago though. So like.
No, it still happened. You asked me one time.
Okay,
so,
yeah. Okay, so yeah, but like and I asked you that, and I'm trying to compare. Like it was a long time ago. Constitution.
That's time.
Take a.
Riley, do you guys want any more of your 1 minute downtime before your summary?
Like 20 seconds.
It's okay. Wait, do I have to do this?
Sydney, you should also be writing
Got
yours
it.
right now.
Summary speech. Wait, so summary speech. So I don't. Hold on, wait. We're all read it. Do I not? Okay. Wait, but I can't read your handwriting. No. Okay. You're supposed to be.
20 seconds.
Oh my
Okay.
With 40 remaining. Ow.
Okay.
But you don't make.
What's your order?
I'm gonna be going down my opponent's case, and then if I have any remaining time, back up my own.
Okay.
Are you guys ready?
Yes.
Okay. For starters, they have 0 impacts on any of their contentions. And we've already, so going down the contention one, we've already refuted it, saying that they say that it would inspire other independence movements, but without data to back that up, that contention, and without looking at it in a good and a bad way, that contention is dropped. Contention 2 is already dropped due to their lack of evidence, and that they're not building it back up after Liam's speech. And then contention 3, they keep throwing this 90% of Catalonians want independence. Well, of course they do, but looking at this in the should aspect, as we should be, because that's what it says in the what's it called?
Resolution.
The resolution and our framework, due to their lack of framework, we should be looking at it as Catalonia is a very small part of Spain, and how would this affect all of Spain, which they have not looked at. And then going down, let's go through our contention 2 because that was confusing. Catalonia can't handle the influx of immigrants. The immigrants aren't they're not concerned, they're not people that are being affected by or they are being affected by this independence movement, but they won't have their voices heard. And the immigration complicates Catalonia's separatist picture. And there's already more and more, the larger it grows, the more immigrants come, increasing by a lot. 12% of the Catalonian independence, or Catalonian people are now immigrants, which is a lot. And it's been affected, the immigrants are affected the most where there's been conflict, and where there's separation, there's usually conflict. Not saying there will be, but there could be. And then that would affect them and not give them a right to vote. And when looking at this in a moral aspect, that's not fair.
Okay. Sydney, do you want to take any of your minute of downtime?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So, well,
That's 30 seconds used. I'll stop you there so you have the other 30 seconds before Lauren's final focus. What's our order?
I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start with our
Pro case?
yes pro case.
All right.
Okay. 2 minutes. All right. So first off, the first thing they said was that we have 0 impacts, which obviously isn't true because if Catalonia, because they even said that if Catalonia were granted independence, it would affect the Spaniards the Spaniards, and also, but if they, in our opinion, if they weren't granted independence, it would negatively affect the Catalonian people. They're talking about our data on contention 1, and I stated it before that there are other countries being inspired by Catalonian independence to start on their own independence, and they're saying that we have no proof that it'll have a positive impact on any of these countries, but they also have no proof that it would have any negative effects on the countries. They said that they agreed that 90% of the Catalonians wanted independence, so I'm not sure why they think it's still a valid argument to say that we shouldn't grant it. They said that Catalonia is a small part of Spain. but then they also talk about how much of an impact it has. Sorry. The only negative, they keep talking about how it would affect the people of Spain, but the only real negative impact that they provide is about the economy, but I don't see why we should put the economy over the standard of living of the people. They said that separation produces conflict, which isn't true. Language was only one example of the negative effects on it, or the reasons why they should be allowed to succeed. And they compared it to the different languages here in America, but the difference is that the people who speak other languages here decided to move here on their own instead of feeling like they've been forced to stay here and be oppressed. They talked about the constitutions and how it would rip apart their constitution, but constitutions do get changed all the time, and if we hadn't made changes in the past constitutions, we'd be living in a very different world today with more people who feel oppressed. Yeah.
Right, everybody seated for the grand crossfire. All four may ask questions.
Can I have the first question? So you say that Catalonia would be affected if they aren't granted independence, but how would they be affected? Because isn't this the way they've been living the entire existence of the country?
Well, since they've already started up a movement, then it has affected the way that those people of Spain see them, and they'd feel more oppressed afterwards because people would be angry.
Okay.
And do you want a question, or I'll take one?
Do you have any questions? Yeah, you can.
Okay, so what are some of your negative impacts for certain countries coming away from oppression?
Well, job loss, and as we stated before, the economy. It would also be
So yeah,
as
it
you
would
guys
be
said,
loss of
unfair
major.
standard
It would be loss of a
living.
lot of money for Spain and Catalonia, and then Catalonia also couldn't independently handle like an influx of immigrants coming from other places, and that's like one of the negative effects. So it's money and the fact that like Catalonia can't it would be a big ordeal for them to take on a ton of immigrants coming into their country, because as we know right now, like a European immigration is kind of mismanaged.
In a morality aspect, though, this is not right because then they'll stay oppressed. Do you believe that
How are they
economy?
oppressed?
I mean, but the thing is, like, we're saying your form of oppression is just saying, like, it's oppression if it's not a homogeneous society. That's basically what we're saying. That we're saying
Yeah,
that
what other
that's not a
besides
form
the
of
language
oppression.
No, that's not
barrier?
what we're saying though.
Besides
Because
the
like
language
you,
barrier, what are the negative, how are they being oppressed?
like I said, like here in America, people want to be here. The people from different countries come here on their own and decide to live here, and they're allowed to speak their own languages. But if there were people here who wanted to or people in Catalonia, they're there, but they feel oppressed by their own cultures and their language. So they probably can't. Some of them can't afford to move or don't want to move. They like where they live, but they don't like the country that they're a part of.
Well, you could say
That
that
could
for a
be
lot
true
of
for
people.
any country, yeah.
Like in America, like that could be like some people are forced labor because they're stuck in that cyclical things of poverty and stuff. Like, I mean, that could be true for any country. They might not want to live here. They might want to go back to their country. Like, I mean, you could say that for any country.
And didn't you say that the language of Catalonia is also adopted by a lot of other parts around Catalonia? So how is that like a language barrier if other countries or other parts of Spain are already adopting their language?
It's just showing that it's a more prevalent language, and that Spanish was the more imposed one.
It's like if you had a group in America that didn't follow the norm, and they weren't allowed to do what they wanted. Now they just want to do what they've done forever and do who they are.
Okay, but it's not being imposed if it's the official language of Catalonia and of the other countries surrounding them.
Yes, and Spain is trying to deny that these people have their own languages and their own cultures and traditions.
I don't think
I mean,
Spain's
I don't know how
denying
they're
it.
trying to
That's
deny
fine.
that.
All right, so you guys have 40 seconds before your final focus.
Okay.
Jester, you should be writing yours during this time too.
Yeah. Who are we debating next?
Very aware of that.
Who are we debating next?
I have to look at the schedule to see.
Go, it's either them or Lockwood.
Right. Okay, and that's 10.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to go top to bottom on theirs, and then if any time remains, I'll go back to ours. Ready? Okay. So looking at this case, we have to look at it through a humanitarian light, through our framework. We have to look at it through the morals of the rest of the world and not just through Catalonia. So for their contention one, they fail to support any of this contention with like they say that like Catalonia inspired these movements, but they have no evidence that Catalonia actually inspired all these movements going around the world. They're just movements happening at the same time, but they have no connection. For all we know, one of these movements could have inspired Catalonia. We have no idea if these have any correlation at all, and they're trying to make the false claim that these all have correlations. So they're trying to put together a weak piece of evidence to say that it's inspiring for these movements to happen. And then also, like, yes, we don't have any negative. We're not like when going back to that first contention about how like if we're saying these movements are good or bad, and they're saying you don't have any negative impacts, but our entire case is never negative impact for them leaving, and that's what they fail to realize. So then moving on to their contention 2 and kind of contention 3, like basically the entire pro case, all they're doing is being ignorant and focusing on one part of the world, which is Catalonia. They are not focusing on the rest of the world. The pro case only fails on they only focus on Catalonia, and through this, they're saying like in order to be a different country, in order to have a different language, a different culture, you have to be a different country. And they're being ignorant to the fact that different subcultures can exist in one country. So the whole argument about inspiring, and so then like going back to the part where the countries like competing, and then they're saying like, oh, this will inspire, and then go back to their first contention about how this will inspire, like the whole thing about that'll just cause war and tension about people inspiring, like it'll just cause different like government like attacks at each other. So then going back down to our own contentions, like going to our for like the loss of money, Catalonia will have a huge amount of money loss because when they're moving, they'll have to. It'll hurt Spain and Catalonia's economy, and then also they can't handle the influx of immigrants. Like we say in the Crossfire, European immigration is mismatched, and having all these immigrants come in, it'll just be too confusing for them. And also, it hurts their constitution votes.
Okay, you got 30 seconds more remaining prep time.
I just didn't give him a look.
Yeah.
This is just the last one. Three L's. I know.
And that's time.
All right. The production of a very strong society of economy over morality is not right, as this is an example of oppression. People are using others for their own benefits. We also spoke about the Spanish Constitution, that rules are being made up at this very time, like they're choosing not to participate in the Catalonian vote for independence. And we also did not say that Catalonia needs to be its own country to have its own language. We simply pointed out the fact that Spain is culturally oppressing them and being and is not allowing them to grow as human beings. If they did have their own country, they'd be able to develop new ways, and any big events that happen to them could turn into big historical events, which then shape the country itself. If you look at America right now, there's American Independence Day, which is what the country is known for, its bravery and freedom. So Catalonia could become its own place and be strong within its own values, which is what the culture is all about and what Spain is not allowing it to have develop. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody.